Want to tell you about one of our partners, Quetzal Education Consulting. Quetzal Education Consulting is a queer, black, and indigenous women-owned firm offering anti-racist consulting, PD, coaching, keynotes, workshops, and more. Their newly released Abolitionist Teaching Workshop series coaches and prepares teachers to further develop abolitionist practices in the classroom. Find out why they have been called the future of educational justice by Dr. Bettina Love. You can book a free consultation with Quetzal by calling 510-397-8011 or visiting quetzalec.com. That is quetzalec.com. And if you mention you heard about them through Two Dope Teachers, you will receive a 5% discount on their Abolitionist Teaching PD series. Once again, you can book them by visiting quetzalec.com on their Connect With Us page.
I'm done. I quit. And I'm going to tell my story before I go. So here we go. Welcome to the exit interview with
Hey everybody, we're back with another episode of the exit interview. Kevin, was it good or was it good?
This is fire. This is good. This is the truth. This is what you needed to hear from the booth. All of it, and then some.
Yeah.
But this is good. Like, this is inspiration. I mean, every episode of the exit interview helps me. Like I said, it helps me start to outline my resignation list. So this one is like, it crossed some T's and dotted some I's.
Shout out to your principal. We have to hear you say that every time we have a podcast.
Do you think that makes her nervous? Do you think she's nervous? She's
Does
like,
it matter?
what can I do?
Matter?
Does it matter? That's right. Because I'm nervous every day. Shoot, I'm a black man in America.
Amen.
I'll
Today
go
we
anywhere and not be nervous.
For real. Today we have on our episode Crystal Gillis, a good friend of mine. Met Crystal a while ago and just been like rocking with her. And she's going to talk about her work in Cherry Creek School District, working at the elementary level, working in secondary, doing all the things and having all the experiences that some of us Black educators are having every single day. So I'm just really excited for you all. We both are, for y'all to hear her story and just really sit with what she's saying.
Yes, it's critical and inspirational and powerful. And I think it's worthwhile for everybody to listen to. So, sit back, pop up your popcorn, get ready to get enlightened.
Let's go.
Hello, exit interview audience, and welcome back. We are here with our guest for this episode, Crystal Gillis. Welcome, Crystal. We are so happy to have you here today.
For sure. Yep.
Thanks for having me.
So if you would, let's go ahead and get into this and tell us about your educational journey. What brought you into teaching? How did you get into the game? What was your inspiration, motivation, and what was that beginning like for you?
Yeah. Well, originally I didn't want to go into education. So like my first job was not my first job, but my first degree was in recording engineering. So I just remember my dad, see, Asia didn't know that.
There we go. I love that. Clue. I'm a musician. So like I started out as a music major too. So recording engineering, that's dope.
Yeah.
And I want to pause for 1 second to say, folks, I've known Crystal for a while now. And I like to say that I helped her like leave the classroom. I just want to put that out there. And
Harriet Tubman in full effect.
Accountable.
Yes. So I had no idea. But go ahead, Crystal. Sorry about that.
Yeah. But I've always been into music, and my dad was actually a DJ, and he was a radio announcer on KDKO Power 1510 with like Dr. Daddio, like back in the day.
There we go.
Yeah.
Shout out. Denver represent. Dr. Daddio.
Yeah.
Let's go.
So I would like go, and my mom would actually have us like sit in front of the radio and listen to them. And I'm like,
Yes.
how are we sitting in front of this radio right now? Like I can't see them, but I remember like going and watching my dad actually do a lot of that stuff. And he would always tell me, like, when you graduate high school, you either need to make money to support yourself. So like, you don't have to rely on anybody. So I was like, oh, I'll be a recording engineer. I'll be the next Missy Elliott, right?
Yes.
Make 6 figures. But then going into college, it wasn't about like music. It was more about the music business. And then I realized I didn't utilize high school as well as I should have. So I would take my exams and I would fail. And I'll be like, oh shit, like I'm paying for this now. Like I can't afford to pay for another semester. And then I would get help from the professor and I would retake an exam, then fail. And like that just continued through all my classes to where I'm like, I'm not even happy right now. And so I had to dive into what I really wanted to do, regardless of pay. My mom actually was a para in the Cherry Creek School District, and she worked with students that have special needs, and I would always go up there and volunteer. And there was one young girl, her name was Sun, and she had Lang's disease, and she was somebody that I really connected with. So that was like my first entry into working specifically with youth, which was youth that had special needs. I was always involved in sports. So my mom put me in anything that could get me in like a dress or tights. So it was like ice skating, gymnastics, ballet.
Oh, wow.
Can you see that, Asia?
No, I cannot.
And eventually I got to high school to where it was more of like the track, and basketball was something that really stuck, and just being a part of athletics and health and weight training. So I was like, maybe I can put these two things together. And then I went back to school to Metro State and I got my bachelor's degree in human performance and sport. And that led me to become a physical education and health teacher. So I was mainly teaching health classes and weight training classes. And then I was like, okay, I'm grown, I'm good. I got this nice income, until I got my first check and they took all the taxes out. And I'm like, shit, I gotta go back to school, get my master's degree. Now I have my master's degree in special education. So that's been my journey in regards to how I became an educator.
Ooh.
So how long did you teach for? Where did you teach? Like what grades or whatever?
Yeah, so I started at Cimarron Elementary School. And that was just me just trying to get my foot in the door. Like, okay, any place that has a job, I'll take it. And it was interesting because when I got that first job, it was on the account that I was a Black educator.
Yes.
And now when I look back at that, I'm like, oh, I wish I would have known what I know now. Because I thought it was just like, I'll take this and use this as my advantage, which I'm glad I did. But I wish I would have held them accountable. So yeah, I started at Cimarron Elementary School, but I
Hold
also—
on one second. Can you talk more about that? Like, what do you mean by I wish I would have held them accountable?
I just going in right after college to where I was naive. So it's just like, oh, they want me there, because I'm a Black educator. And at Cimarron Elementary School, you have the majority of minoritized youth. So they're looking for me because like I'm able to help youth that look like me. And that's part of my community as well, right? Because I grew up in that community. So it was more of me and my lens being able to give back to my community. And I assumed that that's what they had seen. But it wasn't that, it was more of like this burden and lack of support. So when I realized, like when one of the principals came and she said, well, what do you want to do for Black History Month? Maybe we can come up with some new ideas. And I just that's when I realized like, oh shit, like, how are you going to ask me for new ideas? And I've been a product in spite of this district like I graduated from the Cherry Creek School District. You guys didn't educate me in anything different, but now you want me to come up with something new. And that's when I realized in
Dang,
the
that's
district,
powerful.
yeah, I realized I'm not even here to educate in the field that I thought I was educating in,
Mm-hmm.
but it was like, I have to be a part of like these equity, like what's going on with equity specifically in the district. So I didn't even really get a breather my first year. It was always about equity. Any kind of meeting that I was in, it was about equity and how to support minoritized youth.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate you like take your time to say that. And I don't know if Kevin, this was your experience or you felt like it was, but you know, same thing happened to me right down the street from Cimarron at Sunrise, where I was so excited, you know, interviewed for the job, got the job the same day, feeling like really excited, kind of on the back end thinking maybe it's because I'm Black, but that's cool because I'm just like you said, right? And then
Yeah.
now I'm
Right.
thinking, oh Lord, right? So I'm glad that you talked about that. So after elementary school at Cimarron specifically, where else did you go?
I transferred to Cherokee Trail High School because I enjoyed coaching. So when I coached girls basketball, but like the elementary school times and the high school times didn't mix or didn't match. So I would either have to leave the elementary school early and I would ask like, hey, can I leave early? You know, and they would be like, no, you can't do that. And I'll be like, but my paycheck don't say Cimarron, it says Cherry Creek School District. And I'm still going to another Cherry Creek school. So, but I ended up leaving the elementary level. I taught at Cherokee Trail for 2 years. And that's when I was like, it's the same shit over here than it is at Cimarron.
Yep.
So again, it was a lot of racial battle fatigue. I had the privilege and opportunity of having a department head that was a male of color. I had a coworker that was a woman of color, so that was nice. But then I had the opportunity to experience their story as well. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm not the only one.
Yep.
But then even with that, I just realized a lot of complacency within myself and my colleagues to where I'm like, wait, we're just supposed to tolerate this? Like, this is how we're supposed to navigate it?
Yep.
So yeah, at Cherokee Trail, it was a lot of, again, me specifically as a female coach, to where there were girls on the bench that looked like me, to where I was like, I have to present myself a certain way. And there was just, again, situations with white men, because I was a assistant coach, an assistant varsity coach at the time, and the head coach at the time. He was disrespectful on the bench a couple of times if I would give him like feedback, and that's what an assistant coach is supposed to do. I remember being at a game, it was at Arapahoe, and I remember we were playing, it was actually my former coach that used to coach me in high school. And I remember we were down by 3, and I look at him and I say, hey, why don't we put Mariah in? Because she was like hot that game. And I was like, let's put her in, just have her hit that 3. And I just remember him yelling at me like, I got this, which I get it, specifically as a head coach, around that time where it's like 4th quarter and he might be stressed. So I spoke to him after, like, hey, you can't talk to me like that on the bench in front of these girls, like that. That shit's not gonna fly. So that's your warning.
That's your warning.
Kevin, can you hear the pattern? Can you hear the pattern?
If a Black woman tells you, hey, for the audience out there, if a Black woman tells you that's your warning, that's your warning.
And I guess he didn't believe it. It was like he tried me the next game and I was like, okay, this is enough. But again, it's just like as an educator, as a coach, you look for support. So I went like the chain of commands, like they tell you to, like, all right, I brought it up to him, didn't work. Let me go to the athletic director. And I was told to wait till the end of the season because we didn't want any distractions. And I was like, hold up, you want me to conduct myself like this and make it acceptable for a white man to yell at a Black woman on the bench while there's young Black girls watching. And again, I'm explaining myself to a white man, to a white man that I'm reaching out for support. But long story, because the athletic director was actually my evaluator. So long story short, I told him I'm not sitting on that bench. I'll support the ladies. I ended up sitting behind the bench. They labeled it as me not finishing out my job duty. And then my evaluation ended up getting skewed. So we get evaluated throughout the year. So originally I had like all these great standings, however they want to do their evaluations.
Yep.
And I guess they didn't know I kept record of everything. So any evaluation that I had, I would make copies of. And so after the whole incident, I get my mid-year evaluation. And then I realized like things are marked down that weren't marked down at the beginning of the year. And I was like, well, I can't have like did it then, but not now.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So then that was a whole other thing to where I was like, well, I'm not signing it until it gets changed. So it did get changed. I did end up signing it. And then it was just this opportunity that came about to where I was like, I don't even want to be here anymore. Like, I'm not supported. I don't want to be here anymore. I can't coach how I want to. I can't teach how I want to. And then it ended up, I remember calling Dwayne Brandon, and he was a head coach at Smoky Hill at the time. And I said, hey, I'm not coaching here at Cherokee Trail, but I just want to be involved in the game. I'll go ahead and do it for free. Like, I don't, just let me volunteer, let me hand out jerseys. I just want to be around the game. And it ended up to where he was actually transferring jobs. And he said, well, hey, I would love you to be the head coach at Smoky Hill, because I've coached there before. And I was like, oh, here's my opportunity. And it ended up happening to where there was actually a teacher at Smoky Hill, a PE teacher at Smoky Hill that coached baseball, I believe it was, at Cherokee Trail. And he's like, so we can just swap you guys. And of course, it was 2 teachers of color. So we were like, oh, okay, like nobody's missing out because you guys still have teachers of color since you want to retain teachers of color in the district.
So they say. So they
It's
say.
a swap. It's a swap.
Right. But then the principal got involved. She didn't want me to leave. She was like, no, you can't do that, because if you do it, then everybody else is going to want to do it. And then Preston Davis at the time was the athletic director at Smoky Hill High School. And I don't know what he did, but he found some written law or rule in the book that said we can go ahead and do it. And the swap happened. And then I basically finished off my teaching career at Smoky Hill High School.
Can we pause for 1 second?
Yeah.
I just wanna, before you keep going, I keep thinking about this idea of like power and power dynamics, right? You can't do that. You can't do this. I'm gonna mess with your evaluation, right? For the audience, I teach at CU Denver. Shout out to school education.
Shout out.
You know, they're all shout out. And I've had situations where students have come to me and said they're having some experiences when they're in their volunteer hours.
Yes.
With another teacher, the head teacher of their space, and they're afraid to speak up because they're just a student and the teacher evaluates them and they don't want to get in trouble. And I have to tell them, like, listen, you start that now and you'll be always doing that.
That's right.
You'll always do that. So you have to figure out ways figure out ways to navigate those conversations, to get people in your space, in your corner to support you. Because if you're always hiding behind, I don't want to get in trouble, you will always just turn your head to injustice, right? Now, whether people take my advice or not, that's up to them. But I always let them know that's just not okay, because folks will do that. They'll mess with your evaluation and then they'll just sign it because they don't want to get in trouble. They don't want to cause conflict, instead of saying, no, I refuse to sign this. You're going to fix this. I keep record because we know white supremacy loves the written word. Right?
They believe it.
Right? So they keep record and all those things. So yeah, I'm glad that you're talking about like all these different pieces and all these different folks who were just thinking like, they can control you because they write a check
Mhm.
that goes into your account. And that's a no.
Right. And that's like how they retain teachers of color. Because
Period.
even after I did leave, or when I was leaving, I don't know, I didn't know that I was leaving CT, but they didn't know that I was gonna coach at Smoky Hill.
Yes.
So I didn't even know I didn't know I was leaving at the time yet. But somehow word got out. And I remember the athletic director was like, well, you can't teach here and coach at Smoky. And I just remember looking at him and saying, that's off my like contracted hours. I could do whatever I want off my contracted hours. That's none of your concern. And I just remember his face just turning red. And he was just upset because I was done. Like I was just done. And I thought that was the end of it because I was like, okay, cool. I didn't stuck up for myself. I did what I need to do. Went to Smoky Hill. I'm like, oh shit, here we go. Here we go again. So yeah, and then I was at Smoky Hill for about 7 years at Smoky.
Yeah. Wow. And then you were teaching classes at Smoky and coaching.
Yeah, so the whole coaching thing, then that's when I realized like, okay, here it is again. To where they wanted to have me, because actually Preston Davis used to be one of my athletic coaches at Eagle Crest High School, because I graduated from Eagle Crest High School. So he knew what I was about. He knew my potential. He knew I was always in like a gym rat. And then all of a sudden the principal, which was Randy Carr at the time, realized I was pregnant. And I guess that was an issue because I guess like a pregnant Black woman.
That's a problem.
Coach, right. But I remember sitting at Preston's desk and I remember him asking, do you have support at home? And so that was just like, at first I'm thinking like, okay, well, what's their perception of me? Like, do they think like I'm this woman that can't hold my own? Do they think I'm this single Black woman? Like, what's their perception on this? And I said, I have plenty of support at home. Next meeting, it was, you know what? Like, I wish we could have told you this, but you know, Randy wants to go another way and he wants to bring in this other coach. I believe her name was like Andrea Gross, I believe. I'm going to go ahead and bring her in. But if you still want to be a part of the staff, like we would love to bring you on as a JV coach. And I said that
because you were pregnant.
Because I was pregnant. Right. But I'm
Can we just pause? Can we pause for a second? Let the people let that sink in. Like, it's a Black woman told because she was pregnant, she couldn't have the job that she was hired for.
Are we hearing this?
And they didn't say that exactly, right?
Of course not.
They're going to say like, oh, well, we still legally had to open up the interview process, right? And we did interview somebody, but like Randy got his girl over here, so he's going to bring her on instead, which was a white woman that's coaching the team was basically all Black.
Of course.
Black young women. So I'm like, okay. And I'm not saying that I was qualified just because I'm a Black woman,
no.
Right? But if you can't even like trust your athletic director on his move, right? That's taught this Black woman at the high school level that you knew played basketball and like he's trained, like where else is my mind supposed to go?
Mm-hmm.
And I remember over that summer, even while pregnant, and that was with my first child, Jewel, doing all the footwork. Because I knew Smoky Hill was a school to where like the basketball program is not what it is. Like it's not, I remember playing Smoky Hill in high school and like, we would be like, okay, Creek, we got to prepare for Granby, we got to Smoky, oh shit, we got a bye week. Like
we got a bye week.
Like we can take a break. And again, it's just like the culture specifically at Smoky Hill. So I knew things had to change and I knew I needed support to do that. So I knew there were going to be times to where I could potentially be playing with 4 girls on a team, 4 against 5, or, you know, girls would, when I used to be an assistant coach, like there would be some girls that would show up to practice high, or they would have D's and F's. And I'm like, nah, you would not be playing.
You can't play.
Right? but I knew I needed the administrative support. We were in like, I had like negative $5,000 in the account, and we sitting up here traveling to like Colorado Springs where we're about to get our ass beat. So I had to like sit here and change the schedule, right? So I'm focused on budget, changing the schedule, a playbook that they could actually understand.
Yep.
Not that they couldn't understand, but there was no basketball players there, right? So it's more
You
of
were
just
you were building the program from the ground up.
right, and developing athletes, right? So it was basically going from fundamentals to plays, but then like the logistics behind that. So I did all the footwork over the summer, thinking I already had the job, to where by the time that August came, they were like, oh, just kidding. And that's when I told them, I remember stating, you know, I never had to be a head coach. Like if y'all would have just came to me directly and said, hey, we would like you to have the opportunity of being a head coach here at Smoky, but we do have some other candidates. Would you be willing to be a part of this interview process? Then I would have happily like taken a JV or a freshman or a sophomore, or like I didn't even go there to get paid anyway. I just wanted to volunteer my time and be a part of it. But I was so upset because they took my time in the summer to where instead of me just enjoying my pregnancy of my first child, right? It was the footwork that I had done specifically for this white female coach coming in that was supposedly more, and I don't even know what word to put with it. I don't know if she was more anything, more acceptable for the program. I don't know if that's even the right word. More white. Right. There we go. Thank you.
There we go.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
But,
Leave it to Asia to put the right label on it.
Right. So I ended up not coaching. I was like, I'm good. Like, I don't want anything to do with coaching here at this school. But again, it was like another opportunity taken away. Yep. It's like the more that you open your mouth or stand up for yourself, the more opportunities are taken away. But again, they want to retain teachers of color, which makes no sense. So I ended up basically teaching health classes and weight training classes, where that's a passion of mine as well. And then since I wasn't coaching, and then I started seeing more of the inequities specifically in the school system, I started getting involved in the equity work specifically at Smoky Hill. So I got involved with DLT, which stands for the Diversity Leadership Team.
Yes.
And then I also got involved in sisterhood. But then you start seeing inequities in that as well, right? I'm like, why am I begging these kids to come before school, right? And school starts 7, 8 in the morning.
That's right.
Why do they have to either come after school? So I basically, how students were talked about, specifically with other staff members, students would come to me. And so I feel like I just became like this, I don't even know if I feel like I just became this advocate specifically for minoritized youth.
Yep.
Not even that I had a choice. Actually, I did have a choice, but it was more of, how do I want if my kids were in the public school system right now, how would I would want them to have somebody that has support. So how do I do that? And then in order to do that in an authentic way, that's real, that's going to make actual moves based off of action. So I'm not just talking, consequences come into play, right? So for the diversity leadership team, it was the youth that were speaking. I remember they wanted to do roundtables with each of the subject groups. So they wanted a roundtable with the math department, a roundtable with the English department.
Yes.
And they basically told their teachers, what's up? They're like, well, why are you sitting here teaching us this? We never, you never taught us about Black Wall Street. You never heard of it?
Yes.
And like teachers would actually be like, no, I never heard of it. And I'm like this.
That's where you realize.
Y'all don't. And so teachers, specifically white educators, would feel like they were being called out. So then the diversity leadership team got turned to, well, how are those kids allowed to be in DLT? They're not credible kids to be in DLT. And I'm just
why weren't they credible? Because they were kids of color, because their grades weren't good. Like, what was their reasoning?
That I remember having one student, his name was Tay-Ray.
Yes.
And Tay-Ray was always going to be Tay-Ray, like the most authentic kid.
Let's go.
Like
Shout
he
out
would
to
come,
Tay-Ray.
he would come to me and he'd be like, hey, Miss G, you know what that was, right? And I'll be like, I got it, Tay-Ray. Like, I got it.
I love those kids.
Or he
Shout out to Tay-Ray. Shout out to
Shout
Tay-Ray.
out,
Wherever
shout
you
out.
are. Wherever you are.
Do your thing.
The dean's office, because like he was really cool with the dean named Sarah Watts. And he would just tell her like, hey, I know I smell like weed right now, but you know what it is, Miss Watts. Like he didn't sugarcoat anything. And I was like, so, like I learned so much from him. And I remember before spring break, we were doing a presentation on school to prison pipeline.
Yes.
And Tay-Ray wasn't there. And Tay-Ray came running in late. And he said, I'm sorry I'm late, but I'm late because I just got out of jail. Like he told,
literally
in the lectures, literally, we were in the lecture center and he like got the kid, like the youth's attention like that. And he said,
they wanted to hear what was he going through.
Right. And he said, I'm just telling you this because I don't want you to be doing what I'm doing. But I'm getting better and I'm going to graduate this year.
That's what's
up. And he's talking about the school to prison pipeline
in a real way.
Right. And I remember he said, does anybody got any questions? And it was like dead silent. And then Tay-Ray says, he goes, you gonna tell me we sat here and did this presentation and y'all sat here and
y'all don't got no questions
for 90 minutes and y'all ain't got no questions? How about you? And he just started going around handing his
Let's go. Let's go.
Like, and the kids were like, and he's like, you got a question. I was like, you better come up with the question.
Tay-Ray he got it. Yeah. Wow.
Right. And I remember that day when we had a conversation after, and there was a couple white students that stated statements where they didn't agree with school to prison pipeline. And he's like, Miss G, you know that's white supremacy. I'm like, Tay-Ray, like I know, but it's step by step. And I just remember telling all the youth in DLT to be safe and don't do anything stupid over spring break. And that was the last time I seen him. He had ended up getting in a car accident, I believe the weekend coming back, and he passed away.
Oh no.
And he that was even a thing. Like they weren't even gonna say his name at graduation. So that was a push.
Really? Oh no.
At graduation, and he had
and he had impacted the community and lived his life, and everybody knew him, I'm sure, because you can't have the personality that you describe and do what you did, but I mean, I think what you illustrate are the challenges that we have as Black educators, because and I'm convinced of this, in every episode of the Exit interview really, really solidifies this way of thinking, is that Black educators, we come in differently. And even if our intentions aren't to come in differently, it's put on and I grew up in the South, and one of the things that I was raised with was like, you represent every Black person that's going to come after you, every Black person that's come before you, and it puts so much pressure on you, and when they come to you and they say, well, what are we going to do for Black History Month? What about Tay-Ray? Yeah, nobody can relate to Tay. How do you make it work, right? And you know what it is. You're like, I didn't even think about it. But Tay-Ray, like I treat him like I treat everybody else. We all have struggles, right? We all need to be pushed and just respected for who we are. And I just, your story, I think, emphasizes that point once again. And I just think people who are listening to the Exit interview need to hear this. I don't even know what the solution is to it, because I think, like I said, partly it's on us. When we come in, we carry certain attitudes about what we have to do for our community. And I don't want to see that stop, because that is culturally who we are. We never are gonna like give up on our people. Like, you know, like that's one of the things I love about us is that no matter what, you know, I think about the movie Life. I don't know if y'all have watched the movie Life.
Yeah.
But you know, like Eddie had his own problems. Martin had his own problems, his character, you know, but they stay with each other. And that's how we gotta do, you know, like look, that's the truth. That's who we are. That's who we are.
Yeah.
And we know like where I am today is not where I'll be forever. It's not who I am. It's you know, it's just a symptom of like where I'm at in a moment, you know?
Yeah. I'm sitting here as you're talking, Kevin. I'm thinking like, yeah, everything you're saying is true. And I'm thinking about, you know, I just said before I knew that he had passed, like shout out to Taylor wherever you are. And it's just like, that's just it, right? They'll say they're not even going to call this child's name out at graduation. Somebody gets to decide, even if that was turned down eventually, they get to decide. That's the kind of power to not recognize someone's life.
They ended up saying his name at graduation, but I'm like, why did it take?
It should have been a hesitation. I've had students, and I'm sure we've all had other students who have passed away, and we've seen it very easily to say the student's name at graduation. But I think it goes back, Crystal, to your point, like that teachers are like, why does this student need to be on DLT? If I have failing grades, I should probably be the first person you're talking to. Like, if you're really trying to look at data to drive your practices as a building, that's the first people I want to know, like, who I'm going to. And I think we don't trust kids of color to talk about their experiences in learning. Like, we assume that they don't value it. No.
Now we about to break this up into substance of that. But then I also started to realize, like, well, okay, if I'm going to put him in a situation like this, like, how do I support him as an educator? Because now students are being pulled out of class, being targeted by educators, even after I specifically said, do not come up and speak to the youth about what was spoken about. This is their time to speak. Like, they would still do it. They would still, I said, this is a form of oppression. If you decide to pull this child out of your class to speak to them about something that you had the opportunity to speak to in this whole entire group where they have support, right? Don't do that. But they were still doing that. And that's also when I realized a lot of complacency, specifically with educators, even some educators of color as well.
Yep.
To where I'm just like, I felt like I was in the twilight zone.
Yes.
To where I was like, is anybody else seeing this? Or we're just gonna sit here.
Is this just me? This is like, really?
Right. And I felt like I was the only one. Like, I would have like my specific, like, I'll be like, okay, well, I can speak to this dean, or I could speak to this, librarian. Okay, this person supports minoritized. So I had like I can't even count them on one hand, like 3 like white folks that I would direct students to if I needed to, but it was always, there was either no action behind it, specifically from white folks, or there was fear behind it, or it was them coming to me and I'm consulting them on how to do their job. And I'm like, this is exhausting. Like, how do I start to move these pieces to where I was like, we need to make DLT, the youth need to get some kind of credit for the labor that they're doing. Let's at least give them a credit. So we ended up having that club have them have a credit, but I still wasn't satisfied because I'm like, they're still coming in before school, after school, or they have to pick them between sports and clubs. So I wanted to make it a class. I'm like, well, we'll make it a class.
Yes.
We can make it a class during, like, y'all should be able to get this support throughout the school day. And then it was like, you don't have a curriculum. All right, we'll build a curriculum. Built a curriculum. It's not like, how do we know that this curriculum is going to work? I'm like, okay. Okay, so then I believe it was Jennifer Radosevich. She's a librarian at Smoky Hill. She goes, hey, here's this organization called YASPA. Like they're
Yes.
already in Aurora, you know, they got a curriculum. I was like, there we go, there's our curriculum.
There we go.
Give them the curriculum. Well, you can't teach it because you don't got a social studies. I'm like, are you kidding me right now, right? Then we get around that, and then Sarah Watts is one of the deans at Smoky Hill. She goes, well, I got that background, so we can put my name on it.
That's
and you
right.
lead it. I was like, all right, cool.
Shout out to co-conspirators.
Right. And for whatever reason, and I still don't know to this day, they won't make, oh, this is what it was. It was because YASPA wanted to use Cherry Creek School District's name. And I was just like, why would an organization like YASPA want to use y'all's name when you're not a district of inclusive excellence? Like, like why would they want to use your name?
Yeah, for real.
And this was specifically, and I'm thinking in my head, like, it's the time to do it because I had administrators of color. The principal was an administrator of color. The assistant principal was an administrator of color at the time. Lord, what was her name? She passed away, Asia. What was her name?
Alicia.
She was the assistant. Alicia was there, right? We had Chuck Puga there. We had Andre Bala, administrators of color. Did we even have and then there was Matt Gonzalez, all administrators of color. So I'm like, we're gonna do this now if we're gonna do it. And that's when I started realizing the complacency and just that hierarchy of power to where I'm like, we're afraid to like make this a class. And
kids were engaging and talking about their education, which I know, like, whenever they can drive, like, this is what we want. And as a social studies teacher, like, engage. This is civic learning. This is the big picture. It's like, what do we have education for if it's not to raise kids to be involved? And like, the best example of being involved is being able to speak on your education and what you need as a student. We know that like all the research says that that's like the highest level of learning for young people.
Yeah.
So I have a question then. Like, these are a lot of straws, right? On the camel's back, right? And the straws have been being put there for a long time, since Cimarron elementary days. And we always ask the question, you know, like, what was the straw? You don't work in Cherry Creek School District anymore. What was the last straw where you were like, you know what, it's just time to go. I don't feel like doing the limbo and all the moves and the shifts that's needed to dance for Cherry Creek.
It was just the actually seeing education out. It's not education, seeing schooling for what it is. I'm like, there's just so much complacency. Like, how are we, like, we're literally, like, in my head, I'm looking at it like we're literally killing our babies sitting in our classrooms.
Spirit murder.
Like, we're right. And I'm like, at the time, because like when COVID hit, I had 2 students that committed suicide. And that was a deep reflection because one of those students was a part of DLT. And the other one was in my, I think it was like a flag football class or something like that. And even though I didn't directly impact that suicide, but if they were in my space for at least a semester every other day, I still contributed to that suicide some kind of way. And that was just a realization to where I'm like, if I don't want that to happen on my account. And even with me being a part of Cherry Creek School District, or if I was a part of Aurora, whatever district, I'm still a part of any student that dies, whether that's through suicide, whether that's through school shootings. There's some type of responsibility that lies on me as an educator. And the complacency behind that, to where I'm like, as educators, why are we not, if we're supposedly sitting here supposed to educate, and support our youth, why aren't more of us standing up for our youth to prevent this from happening? Because it's there. Like, it's there. There would be times where I would see warning signs from like stuff that students would write, and I would go to the school again, that law of command, like, you need to go here, then here, then here. They would be like, well, they didn't do anything yet, so we can't really. I'm like, you guys, like, this isn't a. So just that complacency, specifically with people that I was around, and I feel like my vibrational energy didn't match that, so there was just a lot of conflict specifically.
Sure.
And then it was just also like the racial battle fatigue, and then my own health, to where I'm like, I'm tired of coming in here and having to like meditate and then weight lift, and then come into my office and like have my Himalaya rock and my essential oils and my pictures of my kids. So I knew when I did leave my office and it's like, okay, let me gear up.
Yep.
Like, then I have this place to come back to. But eventually, like, after 7 years of dealing with the same shit, you're like, okay, these pictures I've seen before, I smelt this scent before, I'm tired of looking at this damn rock. It's about to go upside somebody's head. So I probably just leave now. Right? To where it's like, we have this student die, this student's, getting arrested, this student's being escorted out of my class. And I'm like, we're not doing anything different. And then I would sit in equity meetings to where I'm like, what are we talking about? Like, they'll sit here and talk about the achievement gap or the opportunity gap.
Yep.
I don't even look at like a complacency gap, whoever's complacent, right? But I'm like, why don't you put people's pictures? We got students in this school right now. I want you to post their pictures up there to make it seen, so that these other educators, I say these because I didn't even like being associate. I didn't even like telling people I was an educator in the Cherry Creek School District. I was like, why? I want them to stop looking at our youth, specifically our minoritized youth, as like this number.
That's right.
Or like this piece of data.
That's right.
Like, we just had, at the time, it was like 3 students that ended up doing some shit in Erie, Colorado, got convicted, put their pictures up there. We're a part of that problem too.
Yes.
We're a part of this student suicide. We're a part of this student being, put their pictures up there. So it's like it's just like this gap between the district doing data instead of, like, it's not humanizing. Like, the data and humanization, they're not connecting. And that's when I realized, and then having multiple conversations with Asia, because I remember I was like, hey, I'm part-time with YASPA now. Like, aren't you proud of me, Asia? And Asia's like,
Getting there, but not quite. Asia's like, you got one foot out the door. Come on.
Let's go.
Right.
Come over the fence. We're free.
Right. I remember Asia saying, like, okay, so next year you're gonna be part-time, but like, you're still part-time there. So I'm like, Asia, I got it. It's good. August, September, I lasted 3 months, and I was like, I'm done. I was like, yes, but you got this full-time position available, because I'm ready to walk out. Took like a huge pay cut.
Hold on, let's hold that conversation for the break.
Okay.
Let's take a break, and then we're gonna come back and talk about YASPA, talk about what, like, all things you're doing right now. If you think schools are able to support Black teacher retention, all those things, but let's just pause for right now.
Okay.
Hello, listener. If you've made it this far into the episode, perhaps you are enjoying this remix conversation about power, culture, and education. And if that's the case, please consider joining others like you, educators, community leaders, activists, scholars, artists, and youth by supporting the Two Dope Teachers and a Mic podcasts and productions on Patreon. For as little as $5 a month, you can get on-air shout-outs, sneak previews, and early released episodes, insider information on the happenings in Two Dope Nations, and many other small benefits. The greatest benefit, though, is you enable us to keep bringing the fire. Because of people like you, we have expanded to 2 podcasts, with the Exit interview taking flight and forcing hard conversations about attacks on Black educators. And we've added new features, including episode transcripts and a revamped website, all because of listeners like you. But that's just the beginning. Your support will open up new possibilities for us and for the communities we represent and advocate for. And at the $15 per month level, you receive a sticker. Yes, folks, a sticker. To support the podcast, head over to patreon.com/2dopeteachers. That's patreon.com/2dopeteachers.
All right. So before the break, you started getting into like the afterlife, right? It's like what we talked about the last straw. We talked about this like exhaustion and this battle fatigue around like just trying to do all the things. And I just happened to have in front of me Dr. Floyd Cobb's book, who used to work in Cherry Creek, in his book, and I have just a section on racial battle fatigue and this idea of like hypervigilance, right? Trying to do all the things for all the people and just constantly getting like all these doors slammed in your face, and not really just your face, in the faces of the children that you support, right?
Yep.
So now we're here and you're like, I'm out, I'm good. And you start talking about YASPA. So please, first of all, shout out to Dr. Janice Mackey. That's my girl. Forever.
Yeah.
She was my first client as a consultant. I consult full time. Yes, if folks know, I have a consulting firm, Lions Educational Consulting, and she was the one who said to me, "You should start consulting." So I will always be her in her good graces. I love her forever. So tell us about YASPA. Tell us about your experience and all the things that you want to share about that, and how else you're supporting the community too.
Yeah. So like with YASPA, I knew first I was like looking for ways out of the district, like when I was at Cherokee Trail, but I was like, I didn't really know how to do that. I knew I still wanted to support youth. And I remember having the opportunity. I never was really evaluated when I was at the high school level. So like when you do these evaluations, there's supposed to be people that come in and like help coach you. So at the time I was part-time at YASPA, and I'm seeing Asia like in some of our meetings, and I'm like, hold up, they get coaching? Like what the initiatives? And I remember calling up Dr. Mackey, and I'm like, hey, I know like I'm not full-time with YASPA, but you think I could get some of that coaching from Asia so like I can implement that in YASPA spaces? And she's like, that's cool with me, but you got to ask Asia. And I remember having a conversation with Asia to where I'm like so complex, where I'm like, oh, okay, well, I got to do this and that and this. And I'm like, I can't really leave because like my parent and da 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 da. And then Asia's like, just go where the kids are. Like, why are you? And I was like, oh shit, you're right. Like,
that's right.
Okay, like I can do that. So I ended up having conversations with Janice, like, hey, I'm available if you want me to be full time. Like I just kept plugging that in her ear. Yes. Like I was like, let me just keep plugging that in her ear. And then eventually like the opportunity came up to where I was able to work for YASPA full time, to where I tried doing YASPA full time and then working part time at Smoky, but that didn't work. So I was like, I'm just gonna be out. And YASPA has been like this humanizing space where I've been able to work specifically with dope ass educators.
That's what's up. That's what the goal is.
And coaches, having somebody like Dr. Mackey, to where I remember the first like check-in that I had with her. I was like, I thought it was going to be like this. Okay, well, what are you doing in this space? What are you doing in this space? What are you doing with the youth? And it was just like, how are you doing? And I'm like, oh shit, like we're on that kind of level.
Checking in.
So it was just like this humanizing space, to where it wasn't about like the healing sessions that I was running. It wasn't about me meeting hours. It wasn't about if I was coaching. It was like, how are you doing in this space? And like, how can I support you? And my healing has, when I even look back in childhood, has been specifically through Black women. And that has been,
thank God for like, Black women.
Right. That has been liberatory for me. And that was something to where I started working at YASPA part-time or even when I was full-time and then I was at Smoky Hill part-time, it was hard to make that shift. It was hard to, like, I was like ready to leave smoking. I'm like, okay, yes, finally I get to work with YASPA. But it was hard to make that shift where I'm like, I can't sit here and do this authentic, liberatory, humanizing work to where there's action behind it, and then go back to CCSD to where it's this facade of entrance convergence and politics, and we're going to do it to make it look like we're kind of doing it.
Yeah.
While our youth are being killed, or like you said, spiritually murdered.
Yes.
Spiritually murdered in the classroom.
That's right.
And that's basically when I made that shift to YASPA. I came on YASPA as a community liaison. And I basically, it was when COVID hit, and it was just me working with NAACP youth, because I was like that bridge between the NAACP Aurora branch and YASPA. And I just asked the youth, like, what do you guys want? And what do you need? And that was like the first conversation. I didn't even know it was going to be a thing, but they were like, we need healing. So it was interesting how it all came. Like, me and Asia talk about like vibrational levels and being on our life path. And I was always into health and being a health teacher. And they were like, we need healing. And I was like, oh, I got you. And we ended up doing these healing sessions that haven't gone away. So I've continued to do healing sessions, and now those are implemented specifically at Empower High School and Hinckley High School. I do them the first and third Friday for youth in the community as well. And then also it's nice being in spaces to where I can actually make change, but also having like the support behind that as well. That's the, like with YASPA, I have support behind it. There was no support specifically in the district, regardless of how big the district is.
Yeah.
Now, for our listeners, will you guys just tell us what YASPA is, or like, I think that's important for people to understand.
Yeah, YASPA, it stands for Young Aspiring Americans for Social Political Activism. So YASPA is an organization that's specifically around youth voice. So even like adults in that space, it's never about me or Dr. Mackey or the other educators. It's youth coming in that space and like, hey, this is what I'm hearing. This is what I'm seeing. I need your support. And then we basically do what we need to do to get them what they need. So there's different coalition spaces. So we have like Cops Out in Aurora, which is where students are advocating and saying like, we don't want them in our schools. We have Aurora Youth Coalition, to where they're looking at things in regards to what's going on there, in their community and how they want to change that. And specifically in policy spaces, we have the Denver Youth Coalition, we have concurrent enrollment. So there's all these spaces that basically tie into like social activism and social sciences. And one of the reasons why I did get involved specifically with YASPA, because when I did see specifically minoritized youth being affected in my classrooms, I stopped going to the school psychologist at Smoky or the deans at Smoky. I will call up Dr. Mackey and I'll be like, hey, I got this youth right here and they're struggling. What resources do we have? And she would be like, oh, we got da 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 da. And she's like connecting me with all these community leaders that I had no idea about. Like, I'm talking about like mental health support, like specifically for a Black male student from a Black male therapist. And I'm like, if
so important.
Right. And I'm like, if YASPA could do this, like, this is what I want. But then that's when I was like, well, why can't a district do this? Like, they completely have the funds to do. Why can't they do this? And it wasn't just that. She didn't stop there. She was like, oh no, we got this. No, I got this attorney. Let me hook you up with this person. And oh wait, the family's dealing with this. Oh, I got this place where, we can give the family food. So it was more than what I asked for specifically for just this one student. And I'm just like, this is how we make change. based off of action. So yeah, YASPA, I feel like it would be hard for me to explain specifically what YASPA is, just specific, because it's so much, not just with what it represents, but what it represents to the community, and then like
Yes.
what it's done for me personally. And I've never worked for an organization to where I've been able to get personal growth and like financial stability.
Yes, very important. Like
So,
that's what I think as educators, that's what we went into, it for. And it sounds like a beautiful organization, and like everything about it. As I pulled up the webpage, I'm just like, how have I not heard about this? This is something we all need to hear about. But how can people support YASPA, our listeners, and what can they do to kind of help to make sure if they value these types of organizations and services for students, which I think are critical for us to really have a genuine democracy. Like this is what we're working for. This, like, as a social studies teacher, this is what we're about. But how can people support?
I think that people can support when we see our minoritized youth struggling, and just to be real, like, okay, this school system ain't gonna do nothing for you. Like it might do a little some, but it's not gonna get to like the depth of our trauma specifically. So come on and send them to YASPA. Like we got them over here. Like if y'all ain't gonna do anything with them, right? And you're not gonna do it right and authentically and organically and wholeheartedly, and you're gonna half-ass it, then just send them over here to YASPA to where they're gonna get that nurture and care. And also, I'm still pushing for YASPA to specifically be in our school systems.
Yes.
Because that's a way to specifically dismantle them. And until our education system realizes that our practices need to be dismantled, because we can't even do it with language. Even like the word retain, I'm like, y'all aren't gonna keep teachers of color using the word retain, right? Like it has to be dismantled. And until white supremacy and whiteness is spoken about instead of how our students of color need to be fixed, right?
Yes.
Like nothing's going to change. So that's how I feel like YASPA can be supported for sure. And any kind of donation would be nice too. I'll just throw that out there.
Donation,
those
money
coins.
matters. Money
Listen.
matters.
Yeah,
Money
audience,
matters.
listen, write a check, audience.
Right.
Okay.
Let's go. Get in on it.
Yeah.
Donate.
So, I think you touched upon this, but I do want to know: do you feel like, or what advice would you give, if there is advice? What advice would you give to districts, to unions, to colleagues, Black, white, or otherwise, about like keeping Black educators in the school district spaces? Would you give advice? Is there anything you could say or no?
I mean, I'm sure there's plenty I could say. I don't think they want to hear it. But I know there's plenty I could say. But for me, it's more about the action behind it. Like I can say it, but what action do I need to put behind that?
Period.
And like the only thing I could think of is just understanding the language that our school systems use. So even like the word retain, that means to continue to have or keep possession of.
Yes.
And our teachers of color are not
I'm interested in being retained.
Right. So I'm not hearing any language of how do we, love or nurture or honor or, protect our teachers of color. Like none of that language is being used. How do we hold people, places, or things accountable that are forcing our teachers of color, right, out of the school system, which is white supremacy? Right. And again, if you keep putting that on the back burner, there's not going to be any teachers of color that are educating youth that look like us. And I remember, again, being in one of those roundtables to where the principal at the time, which was Chuck Puga, he stated, well, we're going to get more teachers of color. And I remember stopping him and I said, don't bring any teachers of color here if you're not going to support them.
Period.
And like, he just, again, acted like I didn't say anything, right? But until white supremacy is the conversation of equity work, specifically in the district, they're not going to be able to retain teachers of color. That's why you have so many, specifically in CCSD, we have our, I believe it was 3 of our administrators of color passed away. I'm like, I ain't trying to sit here and work in this district for another 14 years and then just die after I.
That's right.
Like, I don't
That's
even know
what's
if I'm
up.
gonna
I
be
ain't
able to
dying
use
for y'all. I ain't dying for y'all people. I ain't
Right.
dying for y'all people. I'm
Right.
sorry.
And supposedly it was 27 teachers of color that left the district last year.
Good for them. Liberated.
So
Found freedom.
right,
Hey, if
I
you
do
have
not regret my
connections,
decision in leaving. And it
if
was
they
a
have,
pay cut. It was
yeah,
one of the best decisions that and I don't even know how it worked out. It was just like, I resigned. I remember typing up my letter to Chuck Pugh. I basically told him I'm not proctoring these ACTs and SATs. Like, we all know it's systemically racist. I'm
That's right.
contributing to oppression when I'm proctoring these tests, so I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to any meetings that contribute to my oppression. However, this is what I'll do instead. So it wasn't like I was just trying to get out of working. Like, I
Yes.
came up with alternatives that were going to be best for me and my healing, because nobody was coming up with accommodations for a Black female teacher. And I remember him coming back with an email, and he said, well, according to, the Cherry Creek School District laws and policies. And then I just hit him with my resignation letter, and it felt so good. I was like, I got to resign effective.
Like, I got you. Got you. Got you.
You know what though? Let's talk about that. Like, how many of us who heard or just heard you say that and said he came back with it and you came back with it, like uno out, like slap slap, like reverse
Boom.
reverse, draw two, uno out, and it's like I'm sitting here listening to this and I love that for you. I love that for you. I love that for every educator who was like typing up their letter of resignation and like really stepping out there, right? And like you said, for you, it was a pay cut, but you decided the value and it's going to work out and you're not starving. It's been a while now since you've been out here. And so I think that's a big part of it. Just thinking about people that I've been talking to a lot of folks recently in the last couple of weeks who are like, what should I do? How do I get out of here? I don't know how to get out of teaching. And the big part, I've always said this, is mindset. You gotta believe that you are more valuable. And when you leave teaching, you won't die, which is a premise of this podcast, right? You didn't die. Not a single person who has been on our show has just balled up and disappeared into the ether, right? We survive, we thrive, we help our communities, we do dope shit, right?
That's right.
And I need folks to understand that. We keep going. We move on. We're fine. We're fine.
We grow too.
And we grow and we're better off. And our kids are better off. And our families are better off. Yes. And we can be pregnant and Crystal, I know I'm gonna tell Crystal all her business, but Crystal is pregnant right now.
There we go.
It's a boy. I got your present already wrapped. And
I'm pregnant with the pay cut and doing better than I was before.
That's right. Healthier, feeling better.
Right.
Versus your first pregnancy where it's like, I don't know if we can have you work here because you're fragile.
Right.
As if Black women, enslaved Black women.
I know. That's the truth.
Enslaved Black women have been working on this
but you
Turtle
know what?
Island forever.
Right. And like working with YASPA, to where again I had my quarterly with Dr. Mackey, and she's like, so what do you want your maternity leave to look like? And I'm like, wait, hold up. Like, I don't got like 6 weeks for like a vaginal birth or 8 weeks for a C-section. What do you want it to look like? I'm like, oh shit. Like I'm still sitting here trying to process what I want my maternity leave to look like. And I'm doing March. Yes. And I'm like, so calm. I'm like, yes, they got me. That's I'm not stressed about it or anything. It's great.
Last question, as we talk about what it's been great.
Yes.
We're adding this one to our podcast.
The new first ever happened.
You're the first person to answer this question. So, like, what's bringing you joy these days as a wrap up to our podcast tonight?
For myself specifically, it would just being able to decolonize myself as a Black woman.
Yes.
And I would not have been able to do that at CCSD. Like that all came from my short, I'm like, oh, like my short time span with YASPA. So even with just like the language I use, my thought process behind who I am and what I bring specifically to spaces, working with YASPA has allowed me to, it's actually forced me to hone in more on my faith, which that's brought me to places to where I've never imagined. Like me and Asia have had countless conversations. I'm like, I didn't expect to take a pay cut, you know, and be in the home that I'm in right now, or be in the neighborhood. I don't even know how, I'm still trying to figure out how I got here, but it's just my faith, being able to work from home, and be with my own children, being able to sit in spaces. Yeah, being able to sit in spaces to where I can hear what educators are saying. Like if I'm in a parent conference or a equity meeting or a PASS meeting specifically for my children, to where I have the language to be like, yeah, we're not going to do that shit today. Like, this is what you just said. But really I'm just enjoying the process of being able to grow, because in the district I was stagnant. There was no more growth for me, but being able to grow and decolonize myself, being able to work around colleagues that I'm not sitting here like side eyeing, but more of like, what do you got? Like I just, any person that I pick, any colleague that I pick specifically within YAS, but like I've grown from each one of them, even if that's them holding me accountable, right? We call it like calling in, but like I have Tracy where she's like, I do one-on-ones with Tracy Trinidad, and she's like, yeah, we don't use that language, use this. And I'm like, okay, you know, or holding me accountable for how I see certain situations, but allowing me to, it's reflection within myself.
Yeah.
And that's something that as educators, we have to do that in order to educate our youth. That's why white educators need to reflect on their whiteness and how it is portrayed specifically in classrooms and how their whiteness affects our minoritized youth, but there's no reflection there. So it's really just been reflection, being able to decolonize myself. That's been where my happiness has led for sure. And being able to be around specifically Black women that have contributed to my healing. So thank you, Asia. You're one of them.
Of course. Just keep showing up and pay that forward for sure.
I will.
Well, another great episode. Thank you so much, Crystal, for coming on. We appreciate you. Audience, go out there, donate to YASPA, visit their website, yaaspa.org. And we'll see you on the next episode. Peace.